The defendant is simply out of control. He's had his share of second chances. He's been through the system. He's been through the revolving door. 3 times is enough for any man. So say the legislature, so say the people of the state of California.
On March 2nd, 1995, 33-year-old Jerry Dwayne Williams of Compton, California, was sentenced to 25 years to life in prison. He had stolen a slice of pizza. A year earlier, the state of California had passed a 3-strikes law designed to incapacitate offenders who had at least 2 prior convictions for serious violent crimes and were before the courts again. Any new felony conviction would automatically trigger the sentence. Until being repealed in 2013, the 3-strikes law added 9,000 new life sentences to the state's prison population, disproportionately affecting young, impoverished black men like Williams. 2 decades after Williams' conviction, 16-year-old Ethan Anthony Couch of Keller, Texas, was sentenced to 10 years of probation. He had killed 4 people when he drove his pickup truck into a stalled vehicle while intoxicated. Couch's defense attorney had successfully argued that he was afflicted with affluenza, a condition in which his wealth had provided him with a mental condition that prevented him from linking his behavior with consequences. Legal provisions in both state and federal law allow for the consideration of socioeconomic status as a mitigating factor at criminal trials, particularly for youth. In Couch's case, his wealthy background was leveraged as a defense against his reckless behaviors. How can such travesties occur in a system that is intended to be objective? Why is the justice system so unjust? We're going to talk about that a little bit. Wait for it. Hi everyone, this is Professor Popham for CC100, an introduction to criminology. In today's short video, I'm going to read you a bit of an excerpt from a chapter that I wrote with my colleague Les Samuelson at the University of Saskatchewan a few years ago, where we wrote about crime as a social problem, social inequality, and justice. This chapter appeared in Power and Resistance, which was edited by Wayne Anthony, Jessica Anthony, and Les Samuelson, and was published by Fernwood Press in 2017. Authors Jeffrey Ryman and Paul Layton, in their textbook The Rich Get Richer and the Poor Get Prison, published in 2013, attempted to answer some of the questions that I left before the jump. As the title says, Ryman and Layton argue that the US justice system is fractured along economic lines, providing shelter and immunity for justice to those of the middle and upper classes of society. This division is symptomatic of an American ideology of justice that labels the poorest members of society as typical criminals, exaggerating their harm to society. In fact, Ryman and Layton say, for the same criminal behavior, the poor are more likely to be arrested. If arrested, they are more likely to be charged. If charged, they are more likely to be convicted. If convicted, more likely to be sentenced to prison. And if sentenced, more likely to be given longer prison terms than members of the middle and upper classes. The authors could therefore argue that Jerry Dwayne Williams and Ethan Couch were treated differently because they fall on opposing sides of the American ideology, precipitated by their relative economic power. Williams lived in poverty as a member of California's black working class, while Couch lived an insulated lifestyle amongst Texas's elite. While Ryman and Layton's focus is on economic inequality and its role in maintaining the evils of the social order, the true contribution from their research is identifying the often subtle ways in which systems of belief, what we might call common sense, shape the treatment of marginalized populations within the criminal justice system. In other words, our perceptions about crime are manipulated, sometimes intentionally, to reproduce common sense knowledge about good guys and bad guys. For instance, viewers of CSI Las Vegas are subjected to depictions of killers that subtly link racialized and poor subjects to antisocial, spontaneous, explosive, or random violence, embodying senseless acts of low or no self-control. Such imagery is just one of the many forms in which the perspectives can be subtly redefined, regardless of format, instrumental, or structural influences on ideology should be understood as means to emphasize arbitrary and unfounded divides in the public psyche. Unfortunately, ideological divides in the administration of justice are not unique to the United States. Indeed, scholars across the globe have identified the role of economic power in justice matters at all levels. Moreover, critical criminologists have repeatedly emphasized that our society is also characterized by other inequalities of power based upon class, race, and gender. While these concerns tend toward the negative, it would be important to acknowledge that efforts are being made by politicians, scholars, and social activists to change our criminal justice system. These advancements may come in fits and starts, usually in response to a tragic event emerging from disparity, but they nonetheless introduce a modicum of social justice into the Canadian system. For example, the past decade has borne witness to greater and greater scrutiny over the unethical practices engaged in by corporations and wealthy members of society. This is largely in response to major scandals, events like the fraudulent practices from corporations like Enron, the major Ponzi and fraudulent practices of wealthy business people like Bernie Madoff or Conrad Black, or the contrivances of thousands of stockbrokers and banking executives that precipitated the 2008 financial crisis. Greater social awareness of these activities, spurred on by the social protest movements like Occupy Wall Street, has driven legislators to develop effective and meaningful laws in response. To this end, the 40th Parliament of Canada brought Bill C-21 into law, which amended the Criminal Code to include minimum mandatory sentences for persons convicted of fraud greater than $1 million, and also restitution provisions for persons harmed by their actions. Yet we must move beyond piecemeal and partial social legal reforms in criminal and social justice in order to elicit greater change. We need to develop more comprehensive theoretical, analytical, and policy-based critiques of our society. Yet these kinds of initiatives will only partially confront the status quo in Canadian society. To reduce the prevailing inequities, we need to focus on the society's structural and cultural conditions and its distribution of power, the elements that are at the center of the problem. I'm often asked how we can change, how we can address these problems that I bring up in class. This is the best answer I have. Be engaged, take action, take note. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I'm looking forward to seeing you in our next class. Until then, thank you.